the decision of Dobbs v. Jackson Women's Health Organization and whether or not the decision was well reasoned. I will be arguing that no, it was not well reasoned at all. To understand this case, we need to start at its very core, which is the 14th Amendment. So Section 1 of the 14th Amendment provides us with the Due Process Clause, which prevents any state from abridging the privileges and immunities of any citizen of the United States. It also implies a right to privacy. This was discovered in Griswold v. Connecticut, and this Due Process Clause concept would be utilized in Roe v. Wade. In 1973, there was a huge landmark decision by the Supreme Court in which they discovered that the 14th Amendment's Due Process Clause implied a right to an abortion. Now, to do this, they implemented the trimester system, which would be very important for the future of reproductive rights. The system itself is controversial as it kind of gatekeeps women from having full access to abortion. It does provide legal and moral justification for abortion nationwide. It's a sort of compromise between the two sides of the argument. It allows for women to have at least some control over when they can have an abortion, but it also protects the sanctity of potential human life. Now, the decision of Roe v. Wade would be further upheld in 1992 with Planned Parenthood of Southeastern Pennsylvania versus Casey. So essentially it upholds Roe v. Wade, but it also implements two new provisions about abortions. Again, these two provisions are controversial in and of themselves. However, they do provide at least some sort of legal or moral justification for abortion. It's another sort of compromise between the two parties. Important Supreme Court decisions would be upheld for decades until Dobbs v. Jackson Women's Health Org. In 2022, the Supreme Court reached a controversial decision to overturn Roe v. Wade and Planned Parenthood versus Casey, and their justification for doing so was that the Constitution and the Due Process Clause of the 14th Amendment does not explicitly state, nor does it imply a constitutional right to an abortion. They reached a 6-3 decision on this, and ultimately what it does is it changes our factual understanding of the 14th Amendment and Roe v. Wade. Why is this decision problematic? Well, unlike Roe v. Wade and Planned Parenthood versus Casey, this decision is reached without any sort of legitimate legal or moral reasoning. It kind of makes this claim lose a lot of credibility. It simply just reshapes the 14th Amendment and Roe v. Wade without really any justification for doing so. It just kind of reshapes what we have factually known for decades. It also completely ignores decades of precedents that has been set by these important cases. Not only that, but it's generally a huge step backwards for women's rights, reproductive rights, and it's generally a human rights crisis. Further, according to Creutzfeldt in 2016, abortions are going to happen regardless. So implementing a system where women can be legally protected and children can be legally protected just makes more sense. Taking this away does less for human rights than they initially planned it to. So what does this mean for abortions? While it doesn't exactly make abortions nationally illegal, it does give individual states the power to determine what is legal and illegal when it comes to abortions. Now, this is okay if you live in a state like New Mexico. However, if you live in a more conservative state, what does this mean for you? This decision affects millions of women who live in conservative states who no longer have access to abortion. In some states, it's under any circumstances, even if the pregnancy is damaging or potentially traumatic to the pregnant woman's health. Now, this is also a huge concern for anyone who has any sort of concern with basic human rights and constitutional rights. Moreover, it is not a reflection of the 62% majority of Americans that believe that abortion should be legal and a constitutional right in most or all cases. One of the most major concerns about this decision is what it implies. So things that have been deemed a constitutional right for decades can now be simply whisked away without any proper legal or moral reasoning. This is a huge problem. This creates an inherent human right crisis, as basic rights are now in serious danger. Bigger than that, however, is that it is a blatant lack of concern for women's rights and minority rights as a whole. So if Dobbs v. Jackson is now the standard for judicial proceedings, and Supreme Court cases that have been standing for decades can now be modified and changed, other rights that are not explicitly expressed in the Constitution are now in serious danger. This includes voting rights, marriage rights, reproductive rights, privacy rights, labor rights, and anything else that isn't word for word listed in the Constitution or any of the amendments. A common counter-argument is that the decision of Dobbs v. Jackson upholds the sanctity and importance of potential human life. However, there's an inherent problem with this idea. Not only does it show zero concern for women's health or their inherent right to control their own body, but it also is the wrong mindset. It's skipping steps. How can we show concern for potential human life when we haven't even established the most basic human rights of people who are already long-standing individuals? Further, it becomes an argument that has yet to be explored by the Supreme Court. This includes human development, biology, what makes a person, and the fact that there's nothing standing on this position means that the argument cannot stand itself. Now, I have come up with 3 solutions to fix the issue presented by the decision of Dobbs v. Jackson. So as a compromise, we could revisit and explore the original trimester standard that was upheld by Roe v. Wade. We could do this by fixing some of the gatekeeping issues that prevent women from controlling their own bodies and having an abortion when they deem it. This would include less governmental control over a woman's body. Now, if Dobbs v. Jackson were to be completely upheld and decisions about abortions were to be left to the states, then the government needs to, at the very least, establish some sort of constitutional protection for women in cases where pregnancy may be permanently damaging to their health. However, in an ideal situation, I believe that we should create a new amendment that allows citizens to have complete and absolute control over their own bodies as a constitutional right. Now, this would be comprehensive for reproductive rights, meaning that trans citizens would have fundamental constitutional rights, and further, it extends equal rights into a better position.